The night air was heavy with silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the old oak grove behind the farmhouse. Emma's feet dangled above the ground, her breath caught in her throat as rough ropes cut into her skin. She had been tied and left hanging in the treetop by a group of cruel boys from town, jealous, arrogant, and too blind to see the worth of the quiet farm girl who had always minded her own business. Her heart pounded with terror, but she fought back tears, refusing to give them the satisfaction of breaking her spirit. Emma had always been underestimated. To most people in town, she was just a farm girl, the one who wore dusty boots, hauled hay, and smiled through the endless work. They never saw the strength behind her gentle eyes, or the fire in her heart. But her husband, Daniel, saw it all. He was a flight medic, piloting rescue helicopters for emergencies across the state, a man who had seen life and death up close. To him, Emma wasn't just strong. She was the reason he survived the horrors of his job. He loved her fiercely, more than words could carry. The boys who hung her in the tree had always mocked her. They called her farm trash, laughed at her patched clothes, and couldn't stand the way Daniel, handsome, skilled, and highly respected, chose her over anyone else. That night, their cruelty reached a boiling point. "Let's see if your husband can save you now," one of them sneered as they tightened the knot and left her swinging in the darkness. They thought it was a twisted joke, but for Emma, it was a fight for her life. Her wrists ached as she struggled against the rope. Panic surged, but Emma forced herself to think clearly. She had always been stubborn, the kind of girl who refused to give up even when the crops failed, or when bills piled high on the kitchen table. Tonight would be no different. "I won't let them take me down like this," she whispered to herself, each word breaking through her fear. But her strength was fading, and she knew she had only minutes before her body gave out. Then, through the trembling branches, she heard it. The deep, thunderous chop of helicopter blades tearing through the night sky. At first, she thought she was hallucinating. But no, the sound grew louder, closer, until the floodlights of Daniel's medical helicopter pierced the darkness. Fate, or perhaps something greater, had sent her lifeline at the very moment she needed it most. Daniel had been flying back from a late-night mission when he spotted movement in the treetops near his home. At first, he thought it was just shadows, but as the spotlight swept across the grove, his heart stopped. There was Emma, his Emma, dangling helplessly, her face pale, her hands bound. In 47 seconds, his helicopter descended lower than regulation allowed, skimming dangerously above the field. He didn't care about the rules. The only thing that mattered was reaching her before it was too late. He leapt from the chopper before it even too. The moon hung low over the quiet farmland, casting silver shadows across the fields. But the stillness was broken by cruel laughter, mocking, sharp, and heartless. Emma's body swung from a rough oak branch, her wrists bound tight, the rope cutting deeper each time she shifted. Her chest burned as she struggled for air. To anyone who stumbled upon the scene, it might have looked like a tragic accident. But Emma knew the truth, this was no accident. This was deliberate. The boys who had done this were no strangers to her. They were the kind of men who had never grown out of their cruelty, men who thrived on breaking others. They had teased her since childhood, always sneering at her patched dresses, her rough hands, her quiet determination. Farm girl, they'd call her, spitting the words like poison. But deep down, Emma knew the real reason for their hatred, jealousy. They couldn't stand that she had married Daniel, the decorated flight medic who flew rescue missions across the state. Daniel was respected, admired, even envied. And he chose Emma, the humble farm girl who carried hay and milked cows over sunrise, as his wife. That choice burned them. Emma had grown used to their words, but this time, they didn't stop at insults. "Let's see if your hero husband can save you when he's not around," one had said with a sneer, tightening the knot that now held her prisoner in the treetop. They thought it was a game, a cruel joke that would leave her humiliated, maybe broken. But as her lungs screamed for air, Emma realized this was no prank. This was her fight for survival. Her body trembled, but her mind refused to surrender. Emma had been raised on hardship. She had seen storms destroy crops her family desperately needed. She had stayed awake through nights of hunger, learning that strength wasn't always loud, it was persistence, grit, and faith that tomorrow could be better. That same stubborn fire flared now. "I will not let them win," she told herself through clenched teeth, even as darkness threatened to close in around her vision. And then it came, the sound that cut through the night like a promise. The deep, pulsing chop of helicopter blades. At first faint, then closer, closer, until the wind from its descent rattled the treetop branches. Emma's heart leapt. She knew that sound anywhere. Her husband was near. Daniel had been flying back from a mission when instinct pulled his gaze toward the grove. At first, he thought it was nothing more than shifting shadows, but then the spotlight caught movement. His blood ran cold. Emma. His Emma. Hanging helplessly, fighting for her life. His training told him to radio it in, to wait for backup. But his heart told him there was no time. He lowered the helicopter dangerously close to the ground, ignoring every protocol. Rules didn't matter now. Saving her did. The moment his boots hit the earth, Daniel was already running. His rescue knife gleamed under the floodlight as he leapt for the rope, cutting through.